1920. And this year, BOY, we're at 62%. Renaissance went through a renorming process. So when you norm a test, you're looking at a specific population sample and aggregating it with that particular sample of students and setting targets based on that. So setting what is at or above benchmark. For Spanish test, the Renaissance company really only had before 2020, 2021, they really only had HISD students as a population. We were their largest district of Spanish testers. But starting with 2021, we had a larger sample group included in their norming process from around the country of Spanish tests. So that did change what the tests and what the targets looked like. We have not gone back yet because we just received that data. We have not gone back yet to recalculate the 2018-19, 2019-2020 data, which we will do to look at it as an apples to apples. But what's important here is to know that 52 to 62 looks like a 10-point jump, but what we're finding as we dig into the data is it's really a result of the norming process, especially with our Spanish tests, because those are the tests that have a bigger group being included. So let's break it out by English only and Spanish only. So you can see here BOY in 1920 was 65%, and for English only for this year, it's at 64%. So just a 1-point drop, but not that wide gap that we saw with both combined. So here you can see Spanish only, where we see that huge difference. So look at the data between 17-18, where we were at 50. We have those 2 years where we were at 24 for BOY, 24% at or above benchmark for Spanish. Then that additional data set came in with our Spanish testers, not just with HISD, but across the nation. And so that's where we see the 56% BOY this year. So again, we're digging into this a little bit more. We want to go back so that we can see an apples to apples to be able, and we should have that relatively quickly. We just got that norming process done. So in grade 2, progress measure 2.2, the percentage of second grade students performing on grade level in math as measured by end of year math screener will increase 8 percentage points from 62% to 70% in 2024. And here, again, we don't see as significant of a difference. We didn't see the norming difference impact second grade or even third grade nearly as much as we saw it impact first grade. So here, what we're considering is this is a true learning loss here, going from that 49 to the 47, a 2-point drop from BOY in 2019-20 to 47 in 21-22. Interestingly, the losses, when we look at our student groups, we're primarily seeing the differences the biggest difference was between males and females. So our biggest loss was our female student group. Males went from 49 to 49 between those 2 years, and our females went from 50 to 45. When we look at English only, we have a 3-point drop from BOY 1920 to BOY 21-22. In Spanish only, we have an even level data set from 52 to 52. And for students with disabilities, remember this is where we first have a large enough cohort to report out as identification processes start happening in first grade. We again see that increase that we talked about last month with reading from 22 in 1920 to 28 in 21-22. Again, primarily attributable, we believe, to the increased monitoring, the increased training, ensuring best practices are in place. So excited again about that increase for students with disabilities in second grade. So for 2.3, the percentage of third grade students performing at or on grade level in math, as measured by the end of the year screener, will increase 8 percentage points from 69 to 77 in 2024. So here with our third grade math results, we see a 9-point decline. These are students that were in first grade at the onset of the pandemic and in second grade last year, again, about 47% learning from home. Significant decreases were seen across almost all of our student groups, and we are even below where we were in 17-18 for BOY. When we look at English only, you see a 10-point drop, and Spanish only is a 1-point gain. Again, we're looking into that renorming process to look at how many students were part of that, but we anticipate that that's going to be part of what we see in our data analysis. For students with disabilities for third grade, again, we see a 2-point increase here. And when we talk about next steps, we're looking at high quality professional learning, not just with our instructional staff and our teachers, but also our school leaders. So what does the lesson cycle look like? What are the best practices around that? As you go into classrooms, especially math classrooms, what are we looking for? So those professional learning opportunities are across the board. The Redesigned Mathematics Unit Planning Guide, the UPG that we've talked about previously, so making sure that we're bolstering content there. And then the Hb3 Math Academy framework, ensuring that mirroring that reading academy that our math teachers are supported as well. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. We are ready for comments or questions from trustees. For each item of discussion, we will do 2 rounds of 2 minutes each. If an additional round is desired, that can be done with a motion, second, and board vote. Please indicate your interest in the queue. Trustee Bluford-Daniels.
Thank you. Just one quick question, and I noticed it was on some of the slides. Before I'd ask about having the goal line on each one of the slides. I know it's on some, but it makes it a really easy visual. Say, for instance, like package page number 5. It makes it a really easy visual to have a broken line as to what the goal is without having to go down and reference at the bottom what each one of those colors are. So if it would put a goal with a broken line, and I promise you it makes it very, very easy to look at without having to see all this at the bottom.
Duly noted.
I think one of the points of confusion is that we don't have a separate goal for English and Spanish, so that's why we didn't put it on there, but we can put the overall goal for all students.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying, but yeah, put the main goal,
We
whatever
will,
the goal is,
for
because
sure.
even though it's separated according to English and Spanish, at the bottom, your legend distinguishes one from the other. But visually, when you're looking at the graph, if you have that broken line,
For
then
sure.
it gives you a better snapshot of where each of the categories should be.
Absolutely.
Okay, we can make that adjustment.
Thank you.
Trustee Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. House and Dr. Matney for the presentation. Dr. Matney, one of my, I may have missed this, but the renorming process, I know that you said that there's more students outside of HISD. Is that in the United States or is that Texas?
That's in the United States.
Okay. Does the fact that Texas has the TEKS affect anything?
No, not necessarily. So the norming process takes every student who's taking this Renaissance Star assessment, and the skills are similar across the board. And so we go and tie the TEKS to each of the skills on this Renaissance assessment, but so do the other states for their skills as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And when is the MOI taking place?
I do not have that off the top of my
Okay.
head.
It has not taken place yet.
No, I believe it has.
Okay. Do you know when we're going to have those numbers?
We report MOY, Robert, do you have it off the top of your head? April?
Off the top of my head, but the MOI, if it hasn't started yet, it would be ongoing.
Yeah, I think we report it to y'all in April.
Okay. And then, so one of the trends that I see from most of the reports that you are showing us is that there's an increase in our special education students overall. So do you have a root cause for this? Is there something that we're doing that we can do with some of our other students? Can you give us more information about that? And what we're doing right?
Yeah, that's something really exciting. So a lot of the focus has really been on ARD committees writing solid goals that are very target-driven and are measurable. And so when you have that and you're using data to design that, then you can see the outcomes and you know how to adjust along the way. So there's been a really big push on ensuring that ARD committees are coached up in how to do that. And then also just the monitoring of making sure that the progress monitoring is tracked in our system, so that teachers know, okay, I have this student, I need to make sure here's the goal, I have to go in on this date and make sure that I'm recording, are we there or are we not there? And so just that focus and the support along with the monitoring hand in hand is what the team has really seen has lifted this group up.
Okay. So this would be for all teachers, right? Not just teachers who are teaching specifically special education students.
Yeah, so for right now, it's targeted on students who are working with students with teachers who are working with students with disabilities. But you know, monitoring student achievement and growth and progress is best practice for every classroom and every student, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions for now.
Trustee Sung?
Thank you. If I could just take a second to take a point of personal privilege, I want to say thank you to my constituents. Thank you, Tracy, Allison, for your kind words. It's been my privilege to serve your students and all of our students in District 7 and across HISD. I'd also like to welcome Trustee-elect Wade, and thank you for stepping up into service. And I think it says a lot that you've taken the time to come out here to agenda review to prepare yourself to represent District 7 at our coming meeting a week from today. With regards to the monitoring, so thank you very much for the analysis and helping us understand the nuances of the data and the norming, et cetera. I really appreciate that. So very understandably, for all the reasons we've discussed, we're not on track with where we would hope our kids would be absent a pandemic. And I'm really appreciative of all the strategies and how thoughtful they are for getting our kids back on track. Do we see our students getting back on track this school year, or is this really going to be a multi-year process?
It's the latter. It will be a multi-year process. It's going to be a big part of what we are doing in our strategic plan, and we know that, you know, the learning loss over the course of the last 20 months, it will take just as much time, if not more, to ensure that kids get where they need to go. And this goes even beyond, you know, the pandemic, quite frankly. So, you know, some very exciting conversations with, you know, the cabinet and executive staff that we've been really digging into in terms of what this is going to look like. One of the things that I was going to share with you all later on this evening is that I would be asking for a meeting with each of you on Wednesday to talk about kind of next steps in one of the major turnaround efforts that we want to focus on. So yes, to answer your question, it is a long-term process in terms of the learning loss that we've seen, and that's a part of the reason why ESSER was laid out for 3 years versus a lump for 12 months. Those supports need to be in place over the course of years to come to ensure that we provide what students need and what students have seen as loss.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's very, very much understandable. I appreciate your thinking in that strategic way. So I hope that you'll continue to think about what you need from the board and communicate what you need from the board in terms of support. I see here the immediate strategies being taken this year, but I also hope that the board can support you this summer and next year in that long-term plan to support our students.
And that's one of
in
the
their
things, since you asked, that I will be asking on Wednesday, is for the support of some very difficult decisions. In conversation with a couple of you that I've had one-on-ones with this week, that's what I've indicated. You know, I was brought here for a particular reason, and I'm not here, as my mother used to say, as a show toy. I'm here to develop a plan that hopefully will have the support of this community and this board to ensure that we move our students in the direction that we need them to go. So I'm looking forward to that support around difficult decisions.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Those are all my questions, thank you.
Trustee Cruz?
Thank you, President Allen. Okay, so if we can go to slide 6. Okay, so if I'm looking at this correctly, like the huge jump, right? And you mentioned the norming having an effect. Is that the only reason that there is this jump, or is it too preliminary because you haven't looked at the data yet?
Dr. Matney?
Yeah, great question. So what I would like to do is rerun 18, 19, 19, 20 first to be able to answer that.
Okay. Because the biggest jump is only in first grade, correct?
No, the renorming has impacted every grade level of Spanish testers, but this is where obviously we've seen the biggest impact.
Okay.
Of course, when you look at BOY in 1819 and 1920 from BOY to MOY in both, you know, it's a pretty significant jump for both of those years. So we want to really dig down before we can say that this is off track for this population of students significantly or on track even more so than what we would anticipate or where we would anticipate it being.
And you'll share that data the next time we progress monitor this, or prior to that?
I anticipate next time we progress monitor this, unless we can get it sooner,
Okay,
and then maybe send it in an update or a Q&A process somehow.
okay, just curious, thank you. And then in slide 10, so this is first grade, and then slide 10 was second grade. So this is Spanish only, the norming would have happened as well, correct?
Correct.
But the jump isn't there. Do you know why?
No, again, we need to
Okay.
go back. We're not sure right now if this is because we have a lot of dual language students taking it in both languages. So we want to really kind of tease out a little bit more to see
Okay,
if it really is a language norming for the young grade levels or if it does matriculate up in some way.
okay. Because I'm just wondering if that's, if they're taking it in Spanish, they obviously have to read. Spanish is more phonetic. I just wonder if there's a connection there. And overall, when we progress monitor, we tend to see that the kids taking the STAR or the Renaissance, either one in Spanish, tend to score higher. And just wondered if we've really dug into that data and looked at that and why, the reasons, like the root cause, right? Slide 11, I think it is. Yes, just again, really, really excited to see that our students with disabilities are finally getting supports, and I'm hoping to continue to see this upward trend. So kudos to everyone that's working on that. Slide 13. Why do you think there's a significant decrease here?
Dr. Matney?
So when you think about math, and my colleague Maggie Gardea is here as well from the curriculum side, but third grade is where you start applying some of those addition, multiplication into the larger application problems. So we hear from the reading side, you go from learning to read to reading to learn.
Yeah.
In math, you start seeing that flip as well into the application and having to figure out where I have to apply addition or multiplication or subtraction. And so some of it, and given that their first and second grade years were both interrupted, and those are some of those core foundation years of really learning those foundational addition, two-digit addition, subtraction, two-digit subtraction, could definitely have impacted and why we see this decline here.
And Dr. Matney, you mentioned Maggie. I'd like to have both Maggie and our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Sean Bird, just to come up to the front row. And if you guys want to provide any additional insights, being that, especially Dr. Bird, I don't think you guys have had a chance to meet him towards the end of the meeting. I was going to officially introduce him as well as Jeremy Grant Skinner, who, if you would raise your hand, Jeremy is our new Chief Talent Officer as well. So any insights that Sean, Maggie, that you have, please feel free to provide those at this time.
Good evening. As Dr. Matney said, math is really different from reading. In reading, you have the same tics that cycle over and over, but at different levels and different rigor. From math, it's building blocks. And so if there's one block missing from their learning process, it's going to have a domino effect. Giving her example about math, addition and subtraction, it starts in pre-K. They have to have that concrete experience in which they're able to manipulate materials to learn what is adding, what is subtracting, what is putting together, what is taking apart. And as you go from pre-K to kinder, now they're really digging deep into what is addition, what is subtraction. When they get to first grade, now they're working with problem solving. What does it look like when we're putting it into words? But in first grade, they're only working up to 20, the number 20. When you get to second and third, it's going to multiply. Now they're working up to 1,000. But not only are they working on problem solving, now we're adding place value. And so as you can see, as you start moving up into the grade levels, it's still addition and subtraction, but now you're adding so many components to it that it's getting more difficult. If they do not have that experience, that concrete experience in pre-K, it's going to be a big block for them to really get to the level in third and fourth grade that they need to be. And by the way, in fourth and fifth grade, now they're doing decimals, adding and subtracting decimals. So you can see anywhere through that path, if there's a lapse or the student does not pick up those strategies at the level that they need to, they're not going to be successful, or it's going to be a struggle for them to be successful in the upper grades.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. On slide 17, y'all mentioned the Hb3 Math Academy. Is that similar to like the Reading Academies? Can y'all explain?
It is that it's required under HB3, but it's not that it's mandated for teachers. HB3 only requires that districts identify struggling schools using data to provide additional support, and we have done that in collaborations with the area offices.
And then that support is, so the support isn't mandated either, it's just identifying?
Well, it's both. It's
Okay.
identifying and providing the support. We actually have Math Academy TDSs that are dispatched specifically to those identified campuses, but we don't just stop there. Because we know the Math Academy framework focuses on those key skills that we know are where our students struggle, which is problem solving, number fluency, and number recognition or number sense. We provide professional development around that. So we're not only providing it for those campuses, we're providing it district-wide.
And I forgot my follow-up question. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Santos?
Thank you, Dr. Allen, Dr. Matney, Superintendent House. So can you elaborate what high-quality professional learning is?
Sure, and Dr. Bird, if you don't mind coming up and addressing that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, so we are looking right now, as we go through our strategic planning process, about how we're working together with the schools office to support schools in a more effective way. So that is, The academics team will be working very closely with the school support officers and the assistant superintendents to really visit schools together to observe math classrooms, all classrooms, but in this context, math classrooms. And then, bring the information that we're collecting back so that we can realign our professional development offerings for teachers. So that's an ongoing process, but, we're going to be able to understand the problems when we go together to observe with the school support officers and the academic, the TDSs and the academic people, so that we can, formulate a plan that is specific to each campus. Every campus is going to have different needs, but we probably will find some common issues when we look at the data. We'll find some common practices that are happening in schools, and then can come back and create a plan to provide professional development for teachers that will inform our professional development plan.
Okay, so this is professional learning for Hattie Mae White, not for our kids.
No, well, for teachers that are teaching our students.
Okay, so when you talk about the difference between what you're looking for in professional development with the redesigned mathematics unit planning guide, how is that different from the universal learning design? Dr. Cruz, do you remember? It's the Kurzweil that we were using.
So I'm not familiar with the redesigned mathematics unit planning guide, but I'll let Maggie talk about that.
And let me piggyback my second question to that, because it might segue into your explanation. Is this for every grade level? You talked about the concrete in pre-K and kindergarten and first grade. How is this mathematics unit planning guide used at every grade level?
So similar to what we did in reading where we had the recovery lessons, we did the same thing for math. Because it is a building process and making sure that the students are able to master that TEK for that specific grade level, we were very intentional, more so with math, in making sure that we had that skill, that prerequisite skill, built into that grade level. For example, third grade, for math, for addition and subtraction, we made sure that we went back and we saw what was the TEK that they needed to have mastered in second grade to be successful in the third grade TEK. So we designed mini lessons around that, but not only just mini lessons. We also designed workstations, and resources around it. But in regards to the professional development, so when we're meeting with third grade teachers and saying, here's the TEK, but guess what? This is what you have to teach in second grade to be able to have your students master this. Because a lot of times, grade level teachers don't know how to teach that TEK at a lower level. So we're very intentional in our professional development, make sure that they understand how it's taught in the previous grade level and how to teach it in that grade level.
Okay, so the difference between where's this coming from as far as the funding source that we're using to guide this professional development? And is it the same funding source that we talked about with the UDL? I just don't want to double spend, right?
Go ahead, Maggie.
So it's not any additional funding for this. This is just part of the work that we do as a curriculum department for HISD.
Okay, and then one more question. How are we accounting for COVID when you're walking into classrooms now with that learning loss? Because the TEKs that you're referencing are TEKs that they were behind in 2020, 2019,
So
wouldn't they be a little further behind if we're talking about a learning loss?
So what we're talking about, so if I'm a third grade teacher, my curriculum, my UPG guide shows me what that TEK should have been taught and how it should have been taught in second grade. But because teachers have access to all our curriculum documents, they're actually able to go back to second grade and see what that first grade TEK looked like, or even access to first grade TEK, because if there's a gap and the student in third grade isn't at a second grade level and they're at a first, they actually have those documents that they can go back to. But what we also have done as a curriculum department, we added an additional UDL resource or guide that goes hand in hand with our UPG. So teachers are given strategies on how to present the information to the students and give them the opportunity of different ways, a variety of ways of responding.
So the TEKs that you're framing this around, is it the Renaissance 360 TEKs, or are we doing this? So are we teaching to the Renaissance 360 now is what I'm asking?
No, ma'am, we're not. We're teaching to the Texas standards.
Okay. I have one question for you, I'm speaking into existence, you're going to get your doctor's degree, Mr. House. But, so because of COVID, the rise in COVID numbers and the testing shortage that we've had throughout the city, will the teachers be able to work remotely on June 18th? For their professional development? Since we're
And actually, it's something
January 18th, I'm sorry.
something I was going to talk a little bit about towards the end of the meeting. We have worked closely with both the city as well as some of our other legislators to ensure that we increase the amount of testing. So now we're able to test about 35,000 people a day, not to mention with what we're doing at our schools. At about 85% of our schools, we're starting testing, but I'll talk about kind of the when, the where, the schedule. So we've increased that even on our campuses for student and staff, starting today.
So they have to come in to work remotely on January 18th?
The plan is not to work remotely. The plan is to continue the path of educating our kids inside of our building, something that I actually talked about today in the press conference. And I'll talk about the absences and kind of how that's moving forward. We'll look at schools on a school-by-school basis in reference to issues. So the plan is not to move forward with any additional remote days unless the health department comes in and says, this is not healthy to do. You have to slow down, slow the pace, and go remotely. And that hasn't occurred as yet.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm going to reserve my questions for the next one.
Okay.
Trustee Dygard?
Thank you. First, I want to start with the last page, which was the superintendent's response. And I want to thank you, Mr. House, for the improved quality of these responses, because as I went through the data and I was writing down my questions, and I get to the last page, I'm like, oh, a whole bunch of my questions were just answered. So thank you for your thought that you put into that. And let me, sorry, I'm trying to learn the new technology without paper, so I can't flip around. So I'm going to do my best since this has gone quiet. You've mentioned significant declines in math performance. So my question to that is, who is doing better and who is doing worse? Like what groups of students?
Dr. Madney?
Yeah, so the example that I gave about the male-female gap was really a new one for us. And so being able to watch that and monitor that, of course, after next week, y'all will be getting the by campus, so you'll be able to see kind of where some of our shining spots are. We're not overly thrilled with any of it. It's, even the ones that are doing better are not improving as much as we would like for the student groups to improve. And so what we want to do is really kind of raise the floor for everybody to make sure that they're all moving up. But that one, we highlighted that one gender gap because it really was something that stuck out to us as an anomaly.
So what I think I'm hearing in your response is everybody declined equally.
Everybody saw a decline or stayed the same, commensurate with what we've seen historically for those student groups. So we didn't see any student group decline greater than what they normally were behind.
Okay, so I guess that's really, I think in my head what my question related to. It's staying the same, that each group proportionately declined similarly to what the differences were pre-COVID.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know why? And then to the decline that you've noticed in that one measure was just females, do you know why?
No, again, we want to dig down. Is it certain campuses? Is it certain programs? That's not an answer that we have right now.
Okay. But you're
Yes.
asking the question and looking for an
Yes.
answer. Okay. And then, is there anything that's been learned, and I keep asking a similar question every month, all of our kids are back in person. Some were virtual all of last year, some were virtual some of last year, some came back in person after that first 6 weeks for the remainder of the year. is there anything that you're noticing of patterns between those essentially three populations of kids, the kids who are completely virtual, partially virtual, and not virtual, except for, again, the first 6 weeks, that is informing, like, here were some best practices or things that maybe you had already put in place that you found actually were achieving results last year?
Dr. Mandy?
We haven't really done, this was a topic of conversation, of course, in a research department at the onset of the pandemic. What makes this unique is we didn't set out in this pandemic journey as setting it up as a research project. So everybody stayed home for their own personal reasons or went back to school for their own personal reasons. We really haven't found a portrait of an in-person learner or a portrait of an at-home learner. We saw the 12th graders had the highest percent of at-home, and pre-K students had the highest percent of in-person, and it was an even line all the way up. So, that was really the only thing. And so without setting it up as a research project or experiment, we haven't really continued with really analyzing which one was better or worse, because we hope never to have to do it again.
Not which is better or worse, but were there practices for the in-person kids that you found success with that now you need to maintain and replicate or scale? That's where I'm going with that question, but my time is up, so I will wait for next round. Thank you.
Trustee Guidry?
Thank you, President. Thank you for the presentation.
Mic on.
Oh, is it not? It is on. Can you hear me? Okay. With respect to the mathematics UPG, when do you plan to implement that support system that's in here?
Maggie?
That's currently in our documents right now. We started with that intention over the summer and started creating those documents, so those can be found currently.
But are they in the school system? Have these measures, the recovery days, the mini lessons and all of that, has that been placed in the schools already?
Those are in our curriculum documents, and those are the curriculum documents that teachers should be following.
Okay, so they should be following them. Do we know which schools are following them and which schools are not?
And that's a part of what our schools office focuses on, is ensuring that, number one, that the supports are there. Number two, from an accountability standpoint, what's happening in the classroom. That goes all the way down to the principalship as well, and the observations that are happening. So the short answer is yes. Dr. Watts is, of course, responsible for our schools office and what's happening. She's rallying those troops to ensure that the practices that are being focused on are practices regardless of what's being utilized, but the practices are being executed.
Okay. And so we would be able to get some data on who's executing and who, and so that we can see whether or not this is actually working to close the gap.
Maggie?
Yes, once we get a good idea of who is utilizing our documents with fidelity and following our unit planning guide as it is written out, then yes, we would have a better idea as to whether our documents are working or not.
Thank you. So we would be able to get some documentation, some data on that at some point, correct?
We'd be glad to provide whatever data is available.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I have, Superintendent House, with respect to the 500 kids we're going to be hiring with partnership with iEducate, how are we going to utilize those participants, if you will, because I don't want to say just children, because some of them are college students, correct?
Correct.
And are we going to be utilizing them in third grade? Have you set out where you're going to utilize those 500 students?
Yes, I'll let Dr. Cruz, our Deputy Superintendent, talk a little bit about that plan and the execution and different levels that we plan to utilize those students.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Trustee Guidry, we're super excited about our partnership with iEducate and the core of the 500 interns that we're aiming to hire. So it's been decided that we're going to focus on elementary schools. We know that that's the area where there's a lot of need, and also many of the students, of course, are college students and high school students, so we thought it'd be a good start. And they'll be deployed to campuses and with student populations that have experienced the greatest growth, and they'll be paired with teachers at those campuses. So the idea is that they're going to actually be under the support of a tenured teacher. And really, we're seeing this as not only direct benefit for the students in terms of the tutorials they're going to get, but this is also potentially a pipeline of future teachers for us. So we're very, very excited about that. So the short answer to your question is they're going to be deployed to elementary schools and to the students that need them the most.
Thank you.
We'll be moving to round 2. Trustee Bluford Daniels.
Thank you, Madam President. Superintendent House, I heard the verbiage used, raising the floor, and obviously we want to close the gap with the learning loss. And if I can use for a reference, we talk about the next steps that we're going to utilize, but I want to know specifically, like on slide 6, and then on slide 10. On slide 6, we talk about specifically the Spanish-only percentile of students. In slide 10, we talk about the Spanish-only percentile students for second grade math students. So my question is, if you go to package page 27 and 29 and 30, I don't know what slide it is, it's just package page 27, 29, and 30. Let's see. It's page 13, I believe it is. And I'm waiting because I want, okay, that's not it, 13. I'm looking at package page 38 under gold monitoring. Dr. Manning.
Packet page 38.
Specifically, yes, package page 38.
38 does not have a slide.
Okay. Well, when I look at the research, let me just say this. When I look at the goal monitoring the research, in 2017 through 19, obviously the gap between African American students and Hispanic students was like 13 percentage points. And so as we talk about the difference in slide 6 and the specialty that's needed for the Spanish testers and the Spanish-only students, my question is, what are the plans, or how have you identified closing the gap between African-American students and Spanish students? And the reason why I'm asking that question, well, obviously, the reason why I'm asking is because in this data, it shows for I'm looking at progress measure 2.3, the African-American students in 2017, the end of year, they were at 51%. 2018 and 19, they were at 51%. And Hispanic kids were at 73% and 71%. And the white kids were at 89% and 89%. I want to know specifically, have you identified what processes you're going to use to close that gap? First, to raise that floor, as was stated, between the Black African-American kids and the Hispanic kids in order to raise them up to at least be on those, close that gap between the two of them. And because obviously it's not because they can't speak English. It's going to be a phonics type situation in most cases. But I just need to know a plan. We can't keep kicking that can down the road when that gap obviously starts from 2017, 18, 19 through 21 is still anywhere from 13, 15 points difference. So I want to know specifically what that process is going to be to close that gap.
And Trustee Bluford Daniels, I think that's a part of where we're going with not only our highest need schools, our lowest performing schools, but schools as a whole. We're digging into the strategic work now, and we're getting very close. A big part of that conversation is going to be starting individually with you all on Wednesday, and we have gotten very close, very, very close. We know we said March, but we're looking to have a skeleton of what that looks like closer to the end of this month, we'll start some of those conversations with you. But there's some big items that we need to talk to you all individually about first. But I'm very secure that we have a bold plan in place that we're building that will help to accomplish what you're talking about in terms of the deficit and the gaps between all of our different subgroups of students.
And I appreciate that, because obviously it's been there for a long time, and we cannot continue to let it fester, because we're not going to keep raising certain groups for a pathway to the penitentiary and not have them understand just basic reading skills. So we've got to find collectively what processes we're going to use to minimize that impact or to close that gap. Thank you.
Trustee Dygard?
Thank you. One question of clarification. You mentioned, one of y'all used the acronym UDL. What does that mean?
Universal Design for Learning.
Thank you. Because the other acronym was spelled out here, and so I just want to make sure we knew.
Yes.
Universal Design for Learning. Thank you. Page 17 of the presentation, you list some strategies that you're implementing to address these, as your next steps. How are you going to evaluate the effectiveness of the inputs and strategies that you're putting in place?
Dr. Matney?
Sure, so it goes beyond just here at the board table. So these are obviously not a comprehensive list. These are some of the heavy lifts, most high leverage areas that we're working on. And so it begins with, what were the goals? What was the intent of whatever professional learning piece it was? So let's take the Hb3 Math Academy framework. What we want to do is look at what were the goals, what were they focused on? Were they focused on certain teach? Were they focused on certain lessons? And then using the data along the way to see, did those campuses make higher gains with every student group, not just one or two, but every student group across the board, in comparison to ones that were not part of the Math Academy framework. And so looking at the Redesigned Math Unit Planning Guide, what we anticipate seeing is those TEKS areas that we know we've struggled with, students struggled with them possibly last year, knowing that those guides have bolstered that alignment with looking at first grade to second grade to third grade, going back and measuring, making sure that we do see the results. So it happens in offices, it happens here at the dais, it happens at campuses. Our data-driven instructional specialists go out there and help campuses look at those things. So really knowing what the target is and pulling our data in on the back end.
And thank you for that. And I think, tell me if this is a correct sort of way of framing it at this point. Even though these goals that we're monitoring had a baseline that's a couple of years ago pre-COVID, in many ways from a functional standpoint of where are we and how do we make a plan moving forward, the strategic plan you keep telling us about that we'll be seeing soon, you're not in this moment in these presentations, the strategies haven't been completely fleshed out that will come with the strategic plan, and what we can expect after that strategic plan is rolled out is more nuanced information in these reports of, okay, here in the strategic plan, these are the things that I told you that we were going to put in place to address this root cause that was leading to this data and how it's actually playing out. And that I would expect then we would hear a little more of that in these conversations down the road. Would that be a correct assumption?
Agreed, absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Because it's real easy for us to sit here and be frustrated with the data's not where we think it's, but I'm understanding and appreciating why is what I think I'm trying to get at. And then my last question is, and I apologize, I'm not great with names, but in this idea of blocking, my question is, we've got these pre-K kiddos, they missed pre-K, they missed kindergarten, they're now in first grade. So they've missed blocks. How are you identifying and assessing individual children to fill in those missing blocks? Or is it all of the kids in first grade are being filled in the missing blocks from pre-K.
Maggie, you want to share just a little bit about kind of the gaps and many lessons that go along with filling some of those gaps?
So because we do have to follow TEA guidelines, we have to make sure that each child is receiving on grade level instruction. So that has to be taught. But when we're looking at the prerequisite, the mini lesson really takes it down to the other level, like this is what you should learn in order to be successful on this one. But it doesn't stop there. We also provide that support in small group instruction, so where the teacher is really able to sit down with those students and differentiate. So if one student really didn't get it when she did or he did the mini lesson, then that's another opportunity for the teacher to sit down and do that one-on-one or that small group instruction and say, okay, let's dig deeper into this TEK to make sure that you got a solid understanding.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Hernandez?
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on some questions that Trustee Guidry was asking and Dr. Cruz was answering about the tutors. So I know that the tutors will be in elementary schools. Who will decide what grade levels of the elementary schools the tutors will be focused on?
Got it. Dr. Cruz?
Sure. So it's not going to be a cookie cutter approach. It's going to depend on the school. It's a partnership with the school, the campus, to identify what their needs are, what groups of students, what grade levels, et cetera. So it's going to just depend on the needs at the exact campuses, but it is definitely a collaboration with the school, because we also want to make sure that the tutors that are paired are good fits, that the campus has bought into them, and that they're supporting them.
Is there some way that we can ensure that they're not only used for testing grade levels? I feel like that's a very strong, what's the word that I'm looking for? Inclination to set the tutors
There we
to
go.
only testing grade levels, that they are actually like spread out.
Definitely understand your concern, and again, the focus is really about need and not grade level. For example, regardless of whether, we're talking about first, second, third, fourth grade, if we have a stronger need with a particular child or a particular grade level, we want to ensure that that emphasis and that support is provided there. And we're not looking at, third graders, because we know that that's a major, testing point. It's about need.
Okay.
Yep.
And then my second question, is there some type of plan in the future to streamline the unit planning guides and making sure that most of the schools are following the unit planning guides in HISD, so that we have better data?
Maggie, you want to share a little bit about the planning guides?
Absolutely. We will provide professional development so that teachers have a better understanding of what those planning guides are, and how to work through them, and how to use them to utilize and to plan effective lessons. Once they see the value of it, then they're on board on us to making their life easier, because a lot of times you have teachers that go on the internet and they're searching for different lessons. It's in our unit planning guide, and so sometimes it's just getting them to understand how to navigate the system and pull those lessons to be able to effectively provide or to deliver a lesson to the students.
Yeah, and it's about building capacity before you have an expectation. Sometimes you can very easily tell somebody what to do, but if you haven't built the understanding and the expectation around it, and I think that's, a part of what Maggie's talking about. So we want to make sure that we have, to go back to what Trustee Santos talked about, quality professional development available to ensure that we're building that understanding and we're building that interest and that excitement to ensure that they can deliver and execute exactly what it is that we're looking for instructionally.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Santos?
Thank you, President Allen, Mr. House. So 2 issues that continually come up in the District 1 Teacher Advisory Committee is that the data collecting, the benchmarking is interfering with teachers' need to provide meaningful instruction to help students catch up. Also, by with your professional development that you're giving, are you using current exemplary teachers that are up to date with teaching for learning conditions that students and teachers are currently facing?
Sure. You guys want to share a little bit about kind of professional development and the who?
So we do utilize that. We do look for exemplar teachers that are delivering lessons at the level where the students are able to capture the knowledge. Especially with our pre-kinder, we really utilize a lot of teachers to actually film and provide professional development for our teachers. And we always know that colleagues learn better from themselves because they're in the work, and so sometimes they're able to communicate the information better than we are in central office. We know what the intent is, but if you message it the right way that teachers are able to internalize it, it really goes a long way. So we always take every opportunity to look for those exemplar teachers. We sometimes ask if we can film them, but we always ask them, can you help us provide professional development to your colleagues?
So are you paying those teachers?
Yes, if it's after hours, yes, we can
Okay.
certainly compensate them.
So I just want to make the comment that as a policymaker, the solution here is missed learning opportunity, is to address the missed learning opportunities by ensuring that we have smaller class sizes, supporting our teachers with strong professional development, to ensure interactive lessons and strong pedagogy. So by that, I think reducing benchmarks and DLAs to increase maximize every instructional minute is going to be essential these next few years. So my question is there a way we can keep X number of instructional minutes sacred for teachers where you cannot have a DLA between you can have a BOY in August, then through September through October, you can't have X, Y, and Z. Is there a way we can do that?
Definitely something that will be taken into consideration to ensure that teachers have the necessary time to teach what's needed. I think that's what I'm hearing you.
Right, so like
hearing you say.
between the days that we don't have off, like when teachers get their groove, they have that build capacity with their colleagues and their students. So when they're in that groove, we stop. As teachers, we stop teaching. So my unit becomes obsolete, and then the district comes in and pours in their very disconnected teaks to what we're teaching. Because again, one of my other questions is how are you doing this in a very decentralized district, providing this professional development? So,
Good question.
so then the follow-up is that can X number of minutes be sacred for planning time as well, so that teachers can give that meaningful feedback to their students and actually call parents and actually be able to grade papers and really plan for that relationship that they need to build with their students.
What I can tell you, a big part of why Dr. Bird is here is to help ensure that we do the back mapping all the way down to the school level to ensure that everything is in sync. So we'll be taking a close look at all of those pieces of the puzzle to ensure that we have enough time, we have enough professional development, we have quality materials to be able to do exactly what needs to be done.
Right, and I understand that under HB3 and we as a district administration, we're being held accountable for X, Y, and Z numbers. And everybody talks about data, and we need to ensure that we're testing our kids so that way our numbers look good. But I just want to challenge us to to know that we need to ensure that teachers are building their own capacity and children's capacity so that we have real meaningful learning happening in the classrooms. Like I didn't get into education for the numbers, I got into it for the learning, right? So how can we ensure that? I know we have check marks and boxes we need to check, but moving forward, particularly with COVID and that the missed learning opportunities, I'm not going to say learning gaps, that's just nerve-wracking, but the missed learning opportunities that we've had, how can we do that and still remain compliant, right?
We're definitely taking those things into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Trustee Cruz?
Okay, so on page 17 of the report, not of the slides, Well, and basically this slide also. Okay, so the high-quality professional learning, that is going to happen. It's not quite happening yet, my understanding. I just wanted to be clear.
Dr. Manny?
So both.
Okay.
Even though the slide's called next steps, this is also ongoing.
Okay.
And really the next step piece is making sure, like what Dr. Bird talked about, that we're looking at those individual needs based on the strategic plan. So that's what makes it the next piece, is we're using that data and information and goal setting process to ensure then that we're looking at each individual campus to make sure they have what they need.
And how is that different from the PD that we've had or currently have?
Dr. Manny?
So with a new strategic plan, we haven't had that in the past. So PD has really been always based on data, but also sometimes we look at it as one blanket. Campuses individualize a lot, and so what we want to make sure we're doing very strategically is individualizing those pieces throughout the system.
Okay, so it's been individualized. I guess I'm trying to understand the difference, because it sounds different, but I'm not quite following.
Well, and part of this is, we work with teachers, and that's a very natural thing to ensure that teachers have what they need to ensure that they're ready to work with their students. And so, but the other component is ensuring that the leaders know what that link is. So teachers are receiving this through that, for example, the Math Academy framework. So as a leader, how can I support those teachers as they support those students? That's where the individualization comes in, because like what Ms. Gardea said is the Math Academy implementation isn't at every single campus. And so we individualize based on that, ensure those leaders at those campuses are supported in what they need to be able to support their teachers. And so we're still providing the high quality professional learning. We're just ensuring that it's tailored to those pieces. And then when the new strategic plan rolls out, ensuring that happens as well.
And does the professional learning, is it like a one-time thing? Is it a long-term, like the supports that the teacher continually needs to make sure, like if, I remember as a teacher, I'd get these one-time things and then you leave and it was great and then, oh wait, I didn't implement it because it just takes too much to actually put it all together.
Right, so it really depends. So like when you think about the reading academies, that's a long, ongoing, year-long process. And that is best case scenario. So go to a session, talk about these things, and then go practice and do, and then come back and talk about what the implementation looked like. So that's really what we aim for. And that's what some of the work of the DDIS is they go out and they're talking about data and teachers talk about how they implemented things. And so then when they come back out, they talk again.
Okay.
But some professional learning is one day. But our hopes is that there are also things built in that we can build those systems in so that we can go back and review and talk about implementation and next steps for improving the next time.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of we're talking about, again, on the same page of the report, we're talking about, this tutoring and the extra supports. Are parents also getting informed on the progress of their students and any next steps that they need to take or questions they need to be asking?
Absolutely. So that's one of the superintendent's constraints is the reading progress. In fact, I just approved a communication today again for this second round of communication, and some of the information that parents are getting are how to support their students. So here's where your student is. Here's how to support your students, and that definitely was at the direction of the trustees through that constraint, and so having those supports there so that families know action items for them to do, not just here's where your student is, but and here's how you can help as a family.
And does that include math, or I'm thinking specifically like the students that are getting this high dosage tutoring? How do the parents know where their kid is if they're progressing?
Yeah, that comes in with so you're right, the constraint is about those reading levels.
And thank you for that.
Yes, so the House Bill 4545 with those high doses of tutoring, that is about that relationship between the tutor, which is typically also interfaces with the teacher, and that those adults giving that feedback to the families about how they're progressing through their 30 hours or even more of tutoring, and how those gaps are being closed, as measured by whether it's Renaissance, whether it's just an end-of-week assessment. We worked on these 2 TEKs this week, and here's a quick 5-question assessment, and here's where your student is now.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my last question is, again, on the same page 17 of the report. You mention I guess it's the 3rd paragraph, talking about the high dosage tutoring, that says, however, this does not address the needs of students that performed at or above the approaches standard. So you talk about the scaffolds and the interventions for that curriculum, investment in educators is our key. So how, we have the high dosage tutoring for the first group of students. How are we evaluating what we're doing for the students that are performing higher but also aren't growing?
Dr. Manny?
Yeah, so it's similar processes. It's really looking at our data, ensuring that we're not wasting opportunities, those valuable minutes of assessing, that we're actually utilizing the data. And so you're right, we've got those opportunities for those students as directed by House Bill 4545, but we have students who may have moved from master's grade level to meets grade level and declined in the past year, that we need to make sure that they're back up at that higher level. So a lot of that comes in conversations with our DDISs that go out and have conversations with campuses, look at where your students were historically, and then see where they are now. Are they still meeting up to their potential? How can we also scaffold some of those TEKs in that learning to ensure that they're back up at that high level, so that we're doing it? It's one of the things that I think is valuable about STAR. It's not just a pass-fail assessment. You've got those multiple levels of achievement, and so every student needs to be moving up to that next higher level of achievement on STAR, not just stagnating where they are.
Okay, and that is part of the professional learning plan as well? Okay, thank you so much.
Trustee Flynn Villaseka.
Thank you so much, President Allen, and thank you so much, Dr. Matney, for the presentation this evening, Superintendent House. I just have a few questions. I know that we've seen in other progress monitoring reports some information around, at least in this superintendent's response piece, to our participation in reading academies for HB3, and now we're seeing it here for Math Academy. So I'm curious, as far as who's attending when. I know we took sort of like a rolled approach as far as like first kindergarten teachers and it's sort of doing it cohort by cohort. Are we doing the same thing for the Math Academies?
Maggie, you want to address that? Thank you.
So similar to the Reading Academies, it's a 3-year rollout phase. And so we knew that with the Reading Academies that was mandated by TEA, when we started with kinder, we didn't want to double dose the teachers because that would just really overwhelm them. So what we did is we started backwards. We started with the 3rd grade teachers to provide the Math Academy for them. And so this is the 2nd year of the Math Academies. And so now we're working with 2nd grade teachers and any new 3rd grade teachers.
Okay, and this is also a mandated academy as well, or was only the Reading Academy mandated?
So the Reading Academy is mandated that all elementary principals, K-3 teachers, attend the whole Reading Academy. With the Hb3 Math Academy, it was slightly different in that TEA didn't say you have to attend these prescribed modules and attend this academy. But they did mandate that each district create their own Math Academy so long as it was based on data and we were addressing those low-performing schools based on that data. So that's how we, working with the schools office, we identified those campuses and, of course, utilizing 3 years' worth of data.
Okay, and then given where we are right now with the pandemic and some of the learning gaps that have come as a result of that, I would imagine that we're having more teachers participate in this, given what the data is telling us?
For the Math Academy, yes, we've been very strategic in when we provide the professional development, but also when our TDS, Math Academy TDSs, go out to the campuses and support those teachers side by side.
Okay. And as Trustee Santos was saying earlier in some of her comments too, we are providing, since we're doing a lot of this in-house, the opportunity for our exceptional teacher leaders here in the district to be able to take on some of I guess, the requirements for rolling this out to their peers?
For the Math Academies, the Math Academies, we do want it internal in regards to, we want to make sure we're following HB3 guidelines in which the district is providing that professional development. That being said, we still look out for those exemplar teachers, and we do still pull them to assist us with the professional development. So they do work side by side with us.
Okay, all right. Do we have an idea of how many teacher participants we've had so far?
In the Met.
Uh-huh.
Maggie?
I do not have that number.
Okay, all right. And are we also leveraging supplemental programs to support accelerated learning, given the learning loss in math as well?
Absolutely. When we create our unit planning guide, it's not only for addressing those learning loss, it's also addressing the learning loss within our high-achieving students, because we know they either remain stagnant or they went backwards. So when we designed our unit planning guides, we intentionally put a section there where first teach, which is of course vital to all learning and all instruction, was scaffold. So teachers were able to be to address the high learners, the middle, and then the low learners within that first teach by scaffolding the instruction.
Okay, all right, thank you. I know that my colleagues have asked a lot of questions, and mine was really focused on this area, but thank you again for the opportunity to present, and we appreciate the work that the staff has done to help our students.
Absolutely.
Trustee Guidry?
Okay, quick question. For those parents that don't monitor their child's testing or progress, that will not engage or respond to the testing or the notifications, how are you manually notifying those parents?
Dr. Manny?
Yeah, so the first level, like you referenced, is that notification, that sending the actual result out, sending it home to parents. But really, it's about the relationship between the teacher and the families. So it's teachers calling, knocking on doors, helping families know how they can support their students. So it's really the kind of boots on the ground, grassroots from the teacher relationship side.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manny.
Thank you, Dr. Matney. Seeing no other trustees in the queue, we will now move to accept the presentation given to us. May I have a motion? May I have a second?
Second, Hernandez.
We have a motion by trustee Dygard and a second by trustee Hernandez. Please vote. Okay, I just heard it come from that way. Must have been Santos. Don't forget when y'all say the motion, say your name. Thank you. We have 9 for and 0 opposed. Trustees, if there is no objection, we will break procedures because we have 4 speakers that are now ready to speak by Zoom. Our first speaker is on the topic of A3, Acceptance of Board Monitoring Update. Ms. Jones, please admit Speaker Maria Fernandez.
Ms. Fernandez, if you'll cut your camera on, you may begin.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate being here. My name is Maria Fernandez, and I am a parent of a freshman at Bel Air and a recent graduate at Lamar High School. And I've also am a part of the steering committee for the Community Voices for Public Education. And as HISD continues to focus on the board goals, which I know you guys spent quite a bit of time discussing, I'm going to ask that the new school board continue to focus, and Superintendent House, of course, continue to focus on enhancing meaningful instruction, improving learning, having smaller class sizes, libraries in every school, and equitable, culturally relevant instruction. Furthermore, pushing the bar on student learning and student readiness for full participation in our democracy is necessary and important, but an over-reliance on high-stakes testing is not the way there, particularly now that we are dealing with this learning loss. So I wanted to speak with you today to thank you both personally on my behalf and CVPE for the 2 outgoing board members, Ann Sung and Holly Flynn Belaseca. You have stood for students first, also for supporting teachers and other educators as well. You fought for open enrollment schools in every neighborhood, for better special education, for ESL and wraparound services, and for helping other historically under-resourced students. Thank you both for your contributions to the students of HISD over the last 4 years. It was great to have your past learning experience and direct knowledge of what students need and how to accurately measure them. Thank you for championing compliance and audit departments that are fully staffed and effective. I know there's still a bit of way to go, but it's further along today than it was. And then I want to thank you for supporting the safety of our students, teachers, staff, and their families during the pandemic. It's not an easy decision for some, I understand that. But in the end, it's about what's good for the collective. I continue to support masks along with the other mitigation factors that have been put in place. So thank you for following the science and supporting the mask mandate. And I wish you all the best as you embark in your next chapter. Hope to see you soon in a leadership role where you continue to help students, teachers, and schools. Muchísimas gracias por su ayuda, su participación, y por ayudar a los estudiantes de HISD. That's it.
Thank you. Our next item is K4, approval of proposed revisions to board policy, school year, first reading. Ms. Jones, please allow Lacey Ackley.
Ms. Ackley, if you'll cut your camera on, you may begin. Ms. Ackley, if you'll cut your camera on, you may begin. We can't hear you.
I think you're still muted.
You're still muted, Ms. Ackley.
Nope, not yet.
Her mic is moving, but she's not.
How about now?
Perfect.
Gotcha.
There it is. Does that work?
Yes, that's working.
Okay. I am on K4B, delegating superintendent authority to close schools for public health safety. I oppose this item. It leaves no room for voting on the matter. Additionally, this should not be left solely to one person. This is not.
Not yet.
I don't know what's going on. How about now?
Perfect. That's wrong.
Does it work? There it is. Does that work?
Yes, that's right.
I think there's a delay. Okay. I am on K4B, delegating superintendent authority to close schools for public health safety. I oppose this item. I'm not sure what's happening.
It leaves no room for voting Can I remove her?
On the matter. Additionally, this should not be left solely to one person. So, this is not.
Where'd the time go? Where'd the time go?
Ms. Ackley, you may go ahead and continue.
He's not going to hear it because there's a delay.
I'm just asking that the agenda item be removed for leaving the superintendent up for closing the schools without a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, please allow Caroline Walter.
Ms. Walter, you can turn your camera on and you may begin.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Superintendent House, I was concerned to see agenda K4, item K4 on the agenda. I'm still seeing her. I would like you to clarify at this time why you are seeking full authority to close schools for health and safety reasons. Do you think that schools should be closed right now due to COVID, or ever for that matter? Kids need to be in school in person. I feel like that's an absolute. That's something we all have learned throughout the last 2 years, and anything less than that is simply unacceptable. The American Academy of Pediatrics has declared a national state of emergency in children's mental health. Why would we continue to go down a path that is causing so much harm to so many children? Regardless of all of these facts, a decision of this magnitude could be so detrimental to so many people that it should never be left in the hands of one individual, regardless of who that is. I am asking that you commit to bringing normalcy back to schools rather than closing schools, because you cannot close the gap when you close the schools. I hope the Board of Trustees is not in favor of giving this sole responsibility to you. And I hope that you all continue to do the right thing and keep our schools open for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is K8, approval to establish new board policy, student welfare. Ms. Jones, please identify and admit Whitney Ferraris.
She has left the meeting.
She's left the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We will now consider voting items held for discussion from the agenda review business agenda. Trustees, each month, administration will bring forth revised policies with changes recommended by the Texas Association of School Boards. These policies start off as action items at the agenda review meeting for the first reading. Similar to the regular monthly board meeting, each month, all action items for agenda review, including these policies, will begin on the consent agenda. If a trustee would like to have an item held from the consent, they should notify the district chief of staff, Sylvia Trend, by 8 a.m. on Monday prior to the voting meeting. As a reminder, trustees, you had an opportunity prior to this meeting to submit questions before agenda review to the administration. The Q&A document was sent to all trustees via email, and it is in your SharePoint under January board meeting documents and has been posted on the district's web. Trustees, items K1, K2, and K3 were pulled from the consent agenda by Trustee Dygard. She no longer has questions for those items. If there are no questions from other trustees on those items, we will move them back to the consent. Are there any trustee questions from K1? K2? K3? Then we will move to K4, approval of proposed revisions to board policy, EB local, school year, first reading. This item is being held at the request of trustee Dygard. May I have a motion?
So moved, Cruz.
Second, Evans.
A motion by trustee Cruz and a second by trustee Dygard. Trustee Dygard, you're with the first question.
Thank you. So this is a question of clarification from legal, for legal. So as I understand it, currently, the superintendent has, and this has existed even before COVID, for example, a freeze or a flood or a hurricane or whatever, that the superintendent, for reasons of health and safety, can choose to close a school or all schools for a day or a week or whatever, depending upon the situation. But then the board had to ratify how the superintendent adjusted the calendar to make up those days. Am I correct, Ms. McBride?
That's correct. Your current board policy does have a procedure for ratification.
So this doesn't alter the superintendent's ability to close a campus or campuses without a board vote. It simply removes the board ratifying how the superintendent adjusts the calendar to make up those instructional hours and days, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
See no other questions in the queue. We're now ready to approve the balance of the agenda review business agenda items by consensus.
We have to,
we
don't we
have
have
to
to vote? Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please vote. The results of 9-4, 0 against. Now we are ready to approve the balance of the agenda review business agenda items by consensus. May I have a motion? We have a motion by trustee Santos and a second by trustee Blueford Daniels. Any discussion? Please vote. Saying 9-4, 0 opposed. At this time, before we move to the January 13 items, we will take a brief 15-minute recess and return back at, 20-minute recess and return back at 7 o'clock for the second half of the agenda. 7:00 p.m. Our next order of business is to consider items to be presented at the regular board meeting of January 13th, 2022. As a reminder, trustees, everyone had an opportunity prior to this meeting to submit questions to the administration. The Q&A document was sent to all trustees via email. It's in your SharePoint under January board meeting documents and has been posted on the district's website. Trustees, starting with District 1, please state any items you would like pulled for discussion this evening. We will start with Trustee Santos.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Items I-1A, I-3A, and I-4A.
District 2, Trustee Booth Daniels. Where's your binder? I said, where's your binder? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to you. Trustee Hernandez?
I-5.
Trustee Dygard?
So I can't get my notes in this fancy new little thing open, but based on my recollection, I don't have any, but if this opens and I find I do, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Flynn Velaseca?
Yes.
Do you have any items you want to pull from the? No. Okay. Trustee Song?
None additional, thank you.
Trustee Cruz?
None additional?
And Trustee Guidry?
Can you believe that? I didn't
No
pull
additional,
anything.
thank you.
It's a first. We will start at okay, hold on. I have it on that page. At item I-1A, approval of vendor awards for purchases over $100,000 and ratification of vendor awards for purchases under $100,000. Trustee Santos?
Thank you, Dr. Allen. So it's item I-1A, project number 22070223, packet page number 17, Illuminate Education. So this fund, where's this coming from and who will be using this?
Ms. Legato.
I'm sorry, Trustee Santos, could you repeat the project number?
Project number 22070223.
Yes, ma'am. This is a request from the Student Assessment Department. So this vendor will provide a comprehensive assessment platform that will be utilized by students, teachers, and district administrators to monitor and measure the student progress of TEKS.
Does this mean that we are not using Renaissance 360 anymore? And if so, do we have to change our goals with progress measures?
Dr. Madney.
Thank you, Trustee Santos. No, this is our on-track system, so this is where, like when we take DLAs, when we take local assessments, it's scanned and uploaded there. We're required by the state of Texas to maintain some type of platform so teachers can have real-time access to student data. And so this is the product, we've used them before, and so this is the product that was chosen to continue to be used to maintain so teachers have access to their student-level data.
So what happened to the one that we were using before? It was higher ed something or PD track, something to that effect. Because we already had that. So we went from the DLA department, then we went to a centralized system, so that way we could track the data. So why are we switching now?
Well, this is the same vendor that we've had the last couple of years.
So it's the same vendor, but we're paying $10 million more for.
Give the details of the money, Ms. Licata.
So if it's the same vendor that we've been utilizing in the past, it's, this is probably just an updated contract, so it wouldn't be in addition to.
Okay, could we get clarification? $10 million seems like kind of a lot to just say, maybe this is the vendor. Could I resubmit a referral for that? Like where this $10 million, it's coming from administration's budget?
We'd be glad to put that in as a referral and provide you the insight that you're
Okay,
looking
and then
for.
can I add something to that referral too, please?
Sure.
Can we get a breakdown of all the DLAs, the benchmarks, the snapshots, just all of the testing that we're doing, the COVID, like whatever snapshots and the professional development now? Just want a breakdown of everything that we're doing because we have Renaissance 360 and just so we can keep up, I can keep up with the lingo.
We'll add that to the entire
And
referral.
one more thing too, so every department now has a new, I guess, chief. And so when I was looking for the funding source, it's like various schools, but then I'm not sure who the chiefs are and what department that's coming out of anymore. So if that would be like a legend, would be helpful for that as well. And so $10 million is really expensive for a software app. Like what, I just need some justification to approve that.
We'll add that into the referral, definitely.
Superintendent House, if I could just address the
Sure.
issue. Trustee Santos, at the top of each board item, in parentheses of the title, the last in parentheses is the chief that the item would fall under.
Say that again?
At the top of every board item, in the project description,
The parentheses?
yes, that's the chief that
Right,
that
so
project
I
would
guess
fall
maybe
under.
I'm not familiar with the chiefs now, so a breakdown maybe of an organizational chart. We knew who they were coming from before, now it's, I don't know. Thank you so much.
Trustee Cruz?
That must have been from earlier, sorry. That must have been from earlier.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trustee Bluefer Daniels?
Thank you, Madam President. Most of my questions were answered on the Q&A, and I appreciate that. I just have one question, though, and I don't know where it would fall. Where can I get 10 smart boards for Forest Brook? Under what item? I don't know. I know it's under 1A, but anywhere in there. I just need 10 smart boards at Forest Brook. Yeah, I can put it whatever item number you want to put it under, but I just need 10 smart boards.
Thank you for your feedback.
You're requesting things?
No, we're not.
We may not be, but I'm asking. We may not have been in the past, but I'm asking. I need 10 smart boards.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bluefer Daniels. Trustee Flynn Villaseca, thank you.
I'm not good to ask. I know, I'm starting something.
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
Dear Santa.
I'm not, this is an I-1A item 220913 would be the project number. Let's see, here, hold on. No, scrolling down. It's page 4 of 25. All right, thank you so much. So I just have some questions. This obviously is a big item that we do have here listed on as an I item. I imagine this is in preparation for potential future bond work, and so I just wanted to clarify if that's right, first of all. That's my first question.
Which one is that?
So, yes, it could potentially be used for a future bond referendum. This does replace the project that expired at the end of last month. So typically, this project would be for the construction department to utilize in the event that they would have a Spark Park any new projects, any renovations, any additions, et cetera, they would have a list of architect and engineering firms that they could utilize. But to answer your question, yes, should they choose and we issue a bond referendum passes to use this item, they could use this item.
Okay, okay. And then, so would this item then be intended to be reimbursed by bond funds if it were within the next year?
It
year and a
could,
half?
yes.
Okay. And then the not to exceed $25 million, is that per project or is that overall?
It would be overall the 5 years, not to
Okay.
exceed 25 million over a 5-year term.
Okay. So that would be independent of bond funds then? Or no?
It would be inclusive of the bond, should we need architects and engineers, and obviously, if we would need additional funds, we would bring it back to the board for a not-to-exceed increase.
Okay, okay. I do see that there's an MWBE commitment that's listed here, so I appreciate that. Are there some firms, though, that have worked with us in the previous, previously, that might be local, I don't see that are listed? Is there, I'm just curious about.
So the project
That
is still under the
consideration.
code of silence.
Okay.
But we broke this up a little differently than we've had in the past. In the past, if you recall, we just provided a list of architects and engineers. This way, we broke the market baskets up into 5. We separated the projects out so that we could be inclusive of all types of firms. And so what we did was, if you could see a market basket number 1, that's just utilized, we just needed 1 engineering architectural firm for that, and then in the remaining market baskets, we have 9 firms listed for each.
Okay, okay. Okay, can you scroll down to see the other market baskets? Okay, thank you. All righty. And there are 9 for each of the others, but only 1 for the first one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I do believe a lot of these offices have presence here in Houston, but I'm not sure if they're based out of Houston, so that's all. Know that important for local economy.
Sure, on the third column, Trustee Villaseca, anyone that has an
There you
H
go.
listed is a local Houston
Okay,
office.
thank
Yes.
you, I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thanks for helping me understand. All right, those are my questions there. I appreciate it, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Guidry?
Thank you. So in my Q&A question, I asked whether or not these funds had been utilized, or to show where the funds had been utilized over the last 5 years, and they have not been. So we have this $25 million sitting in the budget for this particular item that has not been used for at least 5 years. Is there a possibility that these funds could go back into the general fund so that we could utilize them for, say, employee increases?
So this is just a not-to-exceed amount, and so I'll let, Glenn, do you want to address the funds?
Yeah, so there's no specific account sitting there with $5 million a year, right? So some of that will come from bond, right, which hadn't even passed yet. We don't know how much that will be. We also don't know what projects facilities may have over the next 5 years where they need architectural services. So the money isn't just sitting, there's no account sitting there with $5 million.
Okay, and that's what I thought. I thought we had an account sitting there with that
No.
money in there, just waiting to be utilized, and with the fact that we had not utilized it. That is not the case.
That is not the case.
Thank you.
Correct.
Trustee Santos, there are no other trustees in the queue. Did you need to speak again? Thank you.
Thank you. It's referencing project number 2208-1201, page 18. What is the historical annual cost for this item?
Just over 3.5, just shy of 3.5 million. I do want to, if I may just add to that, I do want to point out that's without ESSER funds. So the reason for the increase, right, this would be a project that would be eligible to utilize ESSER funds. And so that 3.5 million is prior to receiving ESSER dollars.
Okay, so the almost $23 million, that includes the ESSER funds, And this, the materials that we are gaining with this, what's their end date? Like, does the software run out, our license to, does it run out in 3 to 5 years? I just want to make sure that the almost $23 million that we're spending, we could put that into different things that'll have a longer lifespan, as opposed to $23 million where a program becomes obsolete. So is there a rundown of that, or?
This wouldn't typically be, this would be more in line with instructional materials. Yes, they would have the option to provide software, but it wouldn't be a software that would need to be implemented by the IT department, a district-wide software. It might be a spelling software that a school wants to use for a spelling program or a reading program, et cetera. It's materials to help instructional in the classroom.
Right, I just was kind of wondering, Superintendent House, with the money that we have, having a longer-term investment with it as opposed to materials that are only going to last a year or two. Like, if you create a position for professional development and we only have 3 years to fund that position, then what happens? Or just making sure that this money is concrete and it's actually, how is this worked out in the money that you're spending here? Like,
How is it worked out?
like, how did you take that into consideration when you decided, it's $23 million for instructional materials? I just don't know.
Tell me what your question is.
You spent $3.5 million here historically. Then you jumped up to almost $23 million for special education materials, technology equipment, supplies, professional development services. That jump is really big. And how was that determined that you were going to make that jump?
Chief Reed?
So the 3.5 is per year, right? We're not going from 3.5 to 22.5. Right, so it's closer to $17 million, and what we're adding is about $5 million to help incorporate some of the supplies, materials, classroom supports that are going to be purchased out of ESSER.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'll just follow up with the referral.
Okay.
Trustee Cruz?
Thank you. My questions are on the same item. Chief Reed, if I can address him, can you break that math down? Because if it's 3.5 million per year, correct? How are you getting to the 17 million?
Yes. Because on all these items, if you notice, right above the dollar amount is the project term.
Yeah, so it's
Right.
2 years.
So it's a 5-year, oh, sorry, this is a 3-year, 2-year. I'm so used to 5 years. I'm so used to 5-year terms.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
$8.1 million a year. That's
Okay.
what that averages out to.
Yeah.
So then, so then how is it going from 8 million to 22 million?
It's really going to, if it's 8.5 per year, then that's 17 million for the term. Had we been spending,
I'm so confused. I thought it was 3.5 per year.
The historical spend is
Yes.
$3.5 million a year.
Okay, so if this is a 2-year renewal.
It's a 9-month with 2 annual renewals.
Right.
So that averages out, the 22.5 would average out to about $8.1 million.
Got it.
Over the 9 months and 2 years.
Right.
So it would be, we're asking for a little less than $5 million.
Per year.
Yes, to cover the ESSER.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, to cover the ESSER, okay. And do we have evidence, like, are these new, I guess let me ask that question first. Are these new vendors or returning, or is it a mix?
So some of them are, I think we're adding 51 vendors. Some of them, the majority of them we've done business with before.
Okay.
A few of them are new vendors to the district.
And do we have evidence that these vendors, whether they're returning or new, actually positively impact student outcomes?
So that's difficult with supplies and materials specifically? right? To be able to tie the purchase of particular supplies or materials to that kind of, to an outcome.
Is it not doable? Well, like,
With 51 vendors, that would be difficult to do. I'm not,
okay. Thank you.
Trustee Dygard?
Thank you. So just for some clarification, this is a project, and we call it a project. It's really a list of vendors that different departments in different schools would have access to requisitioning goods and services for what they need for children in a classroom.
Correct.
Okay. It doesn't mean it doesn't even mean all of these vendors wind up getting any business from it. It just means they can get business from us.
Correct.
You're increasing the spend because we're increasing how we're trying to do our work because you're trying to mitigate 2 years' worth of learning loss. Well, and it's a very valid question I'm hearing of how do we evaluate for effectiveness these vendors? I mean, some of it comes through with progress monitoring, that if a school is making a bad choice of how they're using their dollars on goods and services for classrooms, that they're not going to achieve the results. But why do we not do any, or maybe we do an evaluation that there are certain metrics they have to meet before they can be included as a vendor that are beyond just fiscal things, they are quality aspects. Is that part of this process when y'all do this?
So when we're recommending, so obviously there's an evaluation committee, and that's part of the evaluation committee when they're recommending vendors, is that they take historical data into consideration when they're making recommendations. We also have documents that we send out to end users to complete that provide either a reference, any positive or negative feedback that they can on the vendors that we put in the vendor file that would, should it be negative, prohibit them from doing business with us. And we wouldn't make the recommendation to the board to award. I do want to point out these vendors would be for an art class. This would be a vendor that there would be vendors on here where the art teacher can come and buy art supplies, or if a class is reading a book, they would come to this to purchase the book. So it's not so much that it's instructional material. I would say it's supplemental material to the work that goes on in the classroom.
And this is back of the envelope math, but it comes down, This is back of the envelope math, but it comes down to about $40 per kid per year. If you max out the not to exceed amount, if we meet that, which usually we don't, because otherwise you have to come back to the board. So usually you don't. I guess the question I would have on this then is, why are we more than doubling the amount? If we look at it as a per pupil spend, why are we more than doubling the amount per pupil? Is it going to get that ROI? Is this the place where we get an ROI by these supplemental instructional materials? Like that becomes part of a strategy question. Is what I'm hearing is we're adding more money to supplemental instructional materials. How does that work into your strategic plan to meet the goals for our kids? Is this a strategic decision?
So of course, the strategic plan, one of the things that we are working on without disclosing exactly where we're going with it, does take a close look at how we allow for funds to be spent. So again, without disclosing that in the proper manner and the proper channels, this is something that we'll be taking a close look at. But a part of what I see is, a part of this is as a result of kind of how decentralized we are and the different choices that we have to bring in, different opportunities to spend.
Then why are we opening the door wider now before you've completed your strategic plan?
Lagata, any additional insight?
So Since we've received the ESSER dollars and the shopping carts in my department that we're processing, we've seen an increased amount of shopping carts as related to instructional material, this type of item. So we're going to, first of all, that project is going to expire. It's out for bid now. This is just a supplemental project to cover us because there will be a lapse in coverage. But we're seeing an increase in shopping carts using ESSER dollars, and we would run out of money and run out of time on that contract. So that's why we're bringing you this one.
And that makes sense to me, but if the increase in the shopping cart, is that a strategic decision, or is that because they have the money?
I think it's a individual site decision and utilizing the dollars because they have the money.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Song?
Thank you. So looking at the slide that we have up, can you remind us how do we read that center information, the budget information? So the fund is various schools or departments that can tap this.
Yes,
And then where would we look to see whether this is coming from general fund or title dollars or ESSER funding?
Chief Reed?
Right, so when it says various schools and departments, that means it could come from any of those sources.
Okay.
One of the previous ones we looked at, I don't remember the number, the one for, can't remember which one we looked at. It actually had a fund listed, right? So it had a 199, 300 fund, and it had a cost center 10. That's very specific. 199 means it's general fund.
Okay. But in this case, since it's not specified,
It could
if
be
a school or
ESSER,
department has multiple buckets they can draw from, then they can use this. And
Not just one department, right?
Yeah. Okay. And I want to note here that there's supplemental materials. Since I'm a former science teacher, there's a lot of science supply companies as well. So science teachers buying lab materials that maybe have broken over the years. Now you have ESSER funds come in, you can resupply those things. So I just want to note that that's in here as well. And you know, we took this class last year about educational finance, where we all learned that the budget is the strategy, yes? So while we're authorizing, or next week if the board authorizes this, you know, then we're authorizing these vendors so that people can go to these vendors and get the supplies they need for their schools. But this board still can come back with a strategic plan and approve a budget that is the strategy for the coming year. So I just want to remind us of that, you know, obviously we need to be watching our dollars in HISD, but that's going to come in the strategic discussion and the budget discussion. Thank you.
Trustee Bluefer Daniels?
Thank you. I went to the store the other day, and my husband's been making groceries, and I bought a loaf of bread. So it was sticker shock to me, almost $3 a loaf. And the loaf was smaller, so I was really upset. And I'm using that analogy. I mean, y'all better pay attention. The loaf was smaller, and it was $3. I don't know about y'all, but I watch my money like that. So you talked about the increase in the shopping cart. Does that have anything to do with the increase of everything, my loaf of bread and everything in general?
Inflation.
As far as the cost of everything and the increase in cost? I'm just asking that. Because again, I'm trying to save $1. I want a big loaf of bread like I used to get for $3, or $2.
Ms. Legata.
So yes, ma'am, we've seen an increase in cost.
Thank you. And is the bread places still open? We can get them real cheap, you know?
Take that into account.
Seeing no others in the queue, the next item on the agenda is item I3. Trustee let me read it first. Acceptance of grant funds in support of district-wide and school-specific programs and authorization to negotiate and execute contracts required under the grants. Trustee Santos?
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Superintendent House, does the administration review the training materials in this grant?
Good evening, trustees. Good evening, Superintendent House. Yes, part of the grant is, before we even apply for the grant, we begin to look at them. And then once the schools buy them, the curriculum department will also work with them, with the campuses, to review the curriculum and the professional development that's being offered.
Okay, so what kind of gardening techniques are being used? Do you know what type of gardening techniques are being used?
Gardening techniques? Oh, for the...
Gardening.
She said bargaining?
Oh, bargaining techniques.
Gardening, G-A-R-D.
Gardening.
Plant and grow. I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
I'm just asking, do you know if they include pesticides and what type of chemicals, particularly with this entity that's giving us the grant?
I'm sure that, no, I don't. We would have to look into that,
Yeah,
honestly.
I would,
Yes.
if you could look back at the history and just kind of interested in, I'm curious as to the content of the professional or training that we'll be providing for our teachers, and make sure that it's a sound training and a sustainable one. So thank you.
Sure, thank you.
And that's a referral, please. Thank you.
Seeing no other trustees in the queue for those grants, we'll move to the next one, which is I-4. Approval of the January General Fund Budget Amendment. Trustee Santos?
Thank you, Dr. Allen. So the budget amendment for $685,105 for student devices. What kind of devices is this amendment being used for?
Hb3 for which one?
I-4.
Which line? Sorry, which item?
$685,105, and I apologize, I cannot get my technology in order here.
It's function 53.
Oh, okay, got it. That was for power up. For power up devices for our high schools.
So we're receiving additional devices off didn't we approve 23 million for them last August?
So it's actually a shift if you look at line 71, function 71, sorry. Dollars being moved from 71 into 53.
So we needed more money for the devices?
Yes.
We're receiving more devices?
I'm not sure how many more devices. We'd have to get that. We have to get that information. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like that in a referral too, please. Thank you. That's all, Dr. Allen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is I-5. Approval of resolution declaring intention to reimburse expenditures related to a future bond issue. Trustee Hernandez?
Thank you. Mr. House, I was just wondering if you can give us a general overview of what you're thinking for the bond and general timeline for it.
Chief Paul, if you don't mind joining me at the podium to talk a little bit about kind of where we are in reference to the prep and our committee that we've put together to really get the ball rolling.
Okay. We have a capital planning steering committee that is in session. We're going into our third meeting this month. And basically, we're kind of laying the framework for a potential bond for November of 2022. So we're still in the planning phase. We're looking at a lot of information as it relates to our current situation. Remember that our last bond was, or the district's last bond was in 2012. So we've had a 10-year gap. And we're finishing up the last project. I believe it's at Bel Air, if I'm not mistaken. So it is imperative, a district our size, that we have a bond every 5 or 6 years. Our deferred maintenance, well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to geek out on you, but this is really cool stuff. But our deferred maintenance, and that's maintenance that we haven't been able to do, is about $1.89 billion. So it just necessitates the need to start planning for a bond. And that's kind of where we are right now. We have each one of you provided us with exceptional people to sit on the committee. And so we're having those conversations, planning, and so forth at this time. So I hope, and so we'll present something to you, I believe, in May to give you kind of a full picture and give you some, give you the committee's work that they're, hard at work doing. And I want to thank y'all for just providing some really enthusiastic people to the committee. Thank you.
Trustee Blueford Daniels?
If you will, the reimbursement expenditures, can we get an idea of what those expenditures were, those bond expenditures were for 2007, 2012, and potentially what that cost will be that we'll be asking for reimbursement for the 2022? Because I wanted to see comparatively, I know inflation again, my loaf of bread, I know it's going to be higher, but I just want to get a general idea of what it was then and in 7, 12, and of course current upcoming. And in 12, those of you that have been around for a while, because I was on that side raising hell, they were concentrating on high schools. And there are a lot of schools in some of the districts that were built in the 30s and the 40s. And so will we be concentrating specifically, and I hope the individuals that we have assigned to that committee are bringing it to your attention. I know that we have landlocked issues with some of the schools. I got that. I like that kind of stuff too, the kind of geeky stuff. But will it be a concentration of L's, middle schools, or all of them? You can look at everybody.
I think we need to have, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think we have to have a comprehensive look at the district. So as you mentioned, the last bond really focused on high schools, but we have some really old elementary schools, we have some really old middle schools. And so I think we need to provide a comprehensive look at the district. And not only that, but also overlay the strategic plan.
And I thank you for that because, again, I was on that side raising Cain about the process. And I had a school, one of the schools in the district, Key Middle School that everybody knows about, that was on television for asbestos and various mold and various other things. It was not rebuilt. And let me just say it again, it was not rebuilt. And it was built in 1957 or 59. And then the school closest to it, which was Barbara Jordan, that was built in 1971, was rebuilt. So I hope that you all take that in consideration, that whatever methodology that was used before, it didn't work well last time.
We'll go into it with a lens of equity, but like Chief Paul indicated, we'll be taking a comprehensive look at the entire school district with a lens of equity to ensure that we do what's best in the best timing. And one of the things that she said is extremely important is that it overlays with the strategic work that we're focused on as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief Paul.
If we're making a list, I have a couple of schools.
Make it a request.
Thank you.
I'm being in trouble for making requests.
Thank you, trustees, so much.
Thank you.
Superintendent House, we are now ready for your comments.
So today was an extremely important day, being that we launched our HISD on-campus COVID-19 testing. Very, very proud. I had a chance to visit today Sam Houston High School, which is one of the several different schools that are taking part. I believe we had 14 schools that were actually testing specifically today. In those 14 schools, we were able to do 570 tests. Now, as our students returned to the classrooms and staff came back to work this week after winter break, We continue to lead the way with safety at the forefront of all of our decisions. As we prioritize safety, HISD continues its mask mandate. That is something that we are not wavering on. We have data that shows that that has made a difference in comparison to those that have not had a mask mandate in place. We've also strongly encouraged our students and staff to get tested regardless of their vaccination status, and providing several opportunities to do so as we did today in 14 schools. Now, during the winter break, we provided 12 different drive-through testing opportunities at our high schools. Just this past Sunday, our testing opportunity provided opportunities for 2,000 individuals to be tested. We continue to expand our partnerships and community throughout the community with different health organizations and officials to provide additional testing and vaccination opportunities for our families, including 2 mega sites at Del Mar and at Butler. I believe at Del Mar alone, we had the capacity of about 1,000 tests a day, Del Mar and Butler, so 2,000 combined. We're excited that starting today, of course, these tests are absolutely free. They're PCR tests, which means they don't get results on the spot. They should get results in about 24 hours. At least 85% of our campuses will be doing some form of weekly or biweekly testing as well. That's significant. 85% of our 280 plus sites will be providing weekly or biweekly testing. So very, very significant. One of the things that I want to reiterate that I reiterated in the press conference earlier today, because I think there may have been some confusion out there, our goal is to keep our schools open. I know with the item that talked about the superintendent having authority to close it, that if you check my record, the school district that I came from, we were one of the only in the state of Tennessee that stayed open. 70% of our kids were in school during the entire pandemic. And we continue to make that progress. We feel like we can continue doing the same thing here. The only reason we would look at the possibility of shutting down at a particular campus is if it's not safe, or if the health department came in and said we had to do something different. So I want our community to know and understand that we're focused and committed to doing what's right and educating our kids inside of our buildings, just ensuring that it's safe. HISD will continue to offer temporary online learning. That has grown. Our numbers are showing that there's an increase there. We must continue to work together to do our part to ensure that safety is number one. We've talked about students, but it's about our staff as well. Now, just to give you some additional insight in reference to the numbers, student absences were up. Monday, we had about a 75.5% attendance rate, which meant that about 45,515 students were absent. Now, on Tuesday, that changed, and we had about an 85% attendance rate, which meant about 26,000 of our students were absent. So we're seeing the number come down, which is a good thing. Now, when we talk about staff, that's where it becomes very difficult if we don't have the necessary staff to ensure that a campus has what it's needs in terms of teaching and administrators to operate. On Monday, we had about 758 staff members that were absent. Tuesday, we had about 527. And then on Wednesday, we had about 321. So you can see that data is trending in the right direction. Now, not all of those were teachers. When you look at specific numbers around teachers, on Monday, we had 301 teachers that were absent. On Tuesday, we had 242 teachers that were absent. And on Wednesday, we had 122 teachers that were absent. So I wanted to make sure that I made that delineation between staff and teachers. Now, our COVID-19 dashboard is up. It's important for our community to know that we update that dashboard twice a week, generally on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But that data is up to date, and we encourage our community to take a close look. Now, a couple of the most common questions that we've gotten since we've been back in session is, are students and teacher absences up? And again, just to reiterate, yes, they are. They are. That is something that we're seeing across the country. I've had a chance to connect with colleagues across the country, Council of Great City Schools, Chiefs for Change, and we're all seeing some of the same challenges. We've all handled things a little bit different. Some have delayed schools. And what I will say is one of the things that's been very helpful to Houston is our weather. We've been very fortunate. What we've learned about this virus is that it flourishes in colder weather. And we've been very fortunate. Our numbers look great before the Thanksgiving holiday. And they shot up. What we're hearing from epidemiologists, what we're hearing from Texas Children's Hospital, Texas A&M, is that we should see a peak probably the 3rd or 4th week in January before things start heading back in the right direction. We want to keep our sights on keeping our schools open. So another question that continues to come up that I want to reiterate is how will the district handle the teacher shortage? Again, the district continues to assign substitute teachers where needed. HISD continues to manage the absence of teachers with our sub-pool and individual school staff. And finally, HISD's central office licensed staff members are working in our temporary online program to accommodate those students that are in quarantine and are prepared to deploy additional central staff as needed. So we're doing what it takes, as we've done, going back to the start of the school year, and I appreciate the commitment of our staff. Now, the last couple things that I want to mention around COVID. Tomorrow I have an opportunity to engage specifically with the Secretary of Education, Cardona, and Surgeon General Murthy to talk about some of these things as well. I, along with about 10 or 12 other superintendents across the country. And then Wednesday, as I mentioned, completely non-COVID related, we'll have the opportunity to connect with you all to talk a little bit more about some of the upcoming things around strategic work, next steps, what we need in terms of support from you all to move the work forward. Last thing that I wanted to do, which I did earlier, I wanted to officially welcome Jeremy Grant Skinner. Jeremy joined us from Baltimore, and he's our new Chief Talent Officer. We're extremely excited to have Jeremy, as well as Dr. Sean Bird, who's been here as well for the last few weeks. Welcome, gentlemen. Please meet the ladies, our 10 at the dais here. That does conclude my updates.
With no further business to discuss, the board is now adjourned.
Dr. Allen?
Yes.
Point of order.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you to Trustee Sung and Trustee Vilaseca for the last 4 years. You are incredible, phenomenal policymakers, leaders, and moms and everything wonderful under the sun and beyond. And we're going to miss you very much and just want to say thank you so much for, and I'm not going to cry.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. She's going to make everybody else.
You know, jumping on this board, I had a lot of, I was scared. And you made everything less scary, and you made everything more possible. And it has been an honor and a privilege to work alongside with you to do so much good for our community, our kids, parents, students, staff. And I am incredibly grateful for your work and over the years of friendship. So thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thank you, ladies. We appreciate you.
Don't make my baby cry. With no further business to discuss, the board is now adjourned at 7:49 p.m. on January 6, 2022. Our next meeting is our regular monthly meeting on Thursday, January 13th of 2022. Thank you.